Organisms and Environments. Today we're going to investigate how organisms and populations may compete for abiotic and biotic factors. Starter: which ranch animals compete for the most food with the white-tailed deer? So let's look at the typical diet of a white-tailed deer in the prairies regions and the cross timbers of Texas. So here we can see what the white-tailed deer eats, and you can see a large percent of its diet is shrubs and vines. Okay, weeds, seeds, grass, crops, then feed. So he really prefers to eat shrubs and vines. So let's see which ranch animal is going to compete with the white-tailed deer. It says cattle that eat grass and feed. So you see your grass and feed are here, and that's not a large part of the white-tailed deer's diet like shrubs. Goats that eat weed and shrubs. Well, since the majority of the white-tailed deer's diet is shrubs, the white-tailed deer is going to compete with the goats because they eat the shrubs as well. Okay, and the weeds, that would be the second highest percentage. So B would be your best answer. And then you can look and say turkeys that eat seeds and fruit. Well, the white-tailed deer is not going to be in too much competition as they are with the goats. Biotic living things versus abiotic non-living factors in an environment. Let's look and see if we can find 7 biotic and 7 abiotic factors in this picture, and we could talk about more if we find them. So let's look at the biotic. Bio mean living, alive. So we see a seal, a starfish, a crab, an orca, a bird, a seagull. Those were your animals. Don't forget your plants. They're living too. So here I see some coconut trees, some palms, some grasses. We could discuss the shark as well. And then if we wanted to talk about the abiotic, meaning the non-living factors, we can say the sun, the atmosphere, the rain, the rocks, the sand. Okay, these are all non-living factors. And of course, yes, the house and the boat. All right, let's have a look at these questions. And we can discuss true and false as a class. And then we'll correct the false statements. So number 1, predators can exist in a plant-free world if their prey reproduces enough. Well, this is going to be false because their prey, whatever they eat, depends on plants. So if your predator is eating the prey depends on the plants. If there are no plants for the prey, then the prey will decrease as well. So loss of habitat is a limiting factor. Okay, this is true. Organisms need space to survive. Organisms may migrate or die if they do not have that habitat, that space. Number 3, marine organisms can survive in any part of the ocean. False. Organisms are limited based on their biotic, their food, and their abiotic factors, such as water temperature, salinity, which is the salt content, sunlight, and dissolved gases. Plants depend on humans for survival. I don't think plants depend on us for survival, but perhaps we need the plants, so that could be a false statement. And lastly, elimination of the top predator in an ecosystem improves the chances of other organisms' survival. Okay, And we would say false because a predator keeps the number of organisms in check. Okay, so we don't want to eliminate that top predator. He has a niche, a role, a job to play in his ecosystem. All right, for our activity, we're going to select the term that does not belong with the group and explain why it does not belong. So let's think about those abiotic and biotic factors. So, example: squirrel, lobster, grass, rock. Your rock would not belong because it's abiotic, it's non living. Number one: plants, bacteria, soil, and fungi. Okay, and we can say all are biotic factors except for soil, which is abiotic. Air temperature predator, or air water temperature predator. All are abiotic factors except for the predator, which is biotic living. Trees, mushrooms, phytoplankton, and algae. All are autotrophs, they're producers, except for the mushroom. Students were discussing how organisms and populations in an ecosystems depend and compete for biotic and abiotic factors. Which students' comments are correct? Explain why the student is correct or incorrect. So, a student says plants do not compete for resources. And we know that that's incorrect because plants compete for resources such as light, water, and space. They compete with the same type of plants or even different plants. Okay. Number two, different kinds of organisms compete for the same resource. Okay, we know that this is correct. Many organisms and populations compete for the same resource. Okay, all resources are limited, so you will have competition. Number three, organisms within a population do not compete with each other for resources. Okay, we know that that's false or incorrect. Organisms within a population are going to compete for food, space, and resources. And lastly, humans do not compete for abiotic and biotic factors. Okay, this is incorrect because humans have needs as well. All right, so for our connection and exit today, living things make up the biotic parts of the environment and require energy, nutrients, water, and space to survive. Water, temperature, light, and wind are non living, abiotic parts of the ecosystem that affect the growth and survival of organisms in the ecosystem. Many organisms and populations compete for the same resources. So we're going to watch a nice video on the Battle of the Kruger, and I want you to think of these questions. Are organisms competing? Are populations competing? Describe the abiotic and biotic factors in the community, and we'll have a discussion about that. Okay, so we saw a lot of organisms competing there, didn't we? We saw the cougars going after the buffalo, and then the buffalo ran in the water, and then a crocodile went over after the buffalo, and then you saw at the end the buffaloes came back, and in large numbers they were able to scare off those predators, right? So we saw different populations competing. We saw the Kruger competing with the crocodiles to get food, right? And there were a lot of abiotic and biotic factors. We saw those living and non living factors in the community. Some of the non living things, the water, the sand, the temperature, the wind. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed your lesson today.